Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurudeva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam, Trilokyam Sacharacharam, Padam darshitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata cha Pita, Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha, Tvameva Vedya Dravinam, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Yatha sarvani bhutani pratibhanti stithani cha yatraivo pashamam yanti tasmai satyatmane namaha. So, I think Mark told us we begin the 14th chapter this evening. Is that correct?
Yes.
And can you help us out, please, Puneet?
Yeah. Chaturdashaha Sargaha, chapter 14. Gadhyu Pakyanam, the story of Gadhi. Section 1. Swasya Shwapacha Twadi Darshanam, the seeing himself as one of a degraded caste or dog feeder. Vashishta Uvacha Jagan Maya Prapanchasya Vaichitraya Pratipattaye Iti Hansa Mamam Vakshe Shrinushvava Hitonadha. For the perception of the variety or strangeness of the display of worldly illusion, I shall relate this legend. Sinless one, hear attentively.
So the idea is that though Brahman is one, the multiplicity of the world appears as many. And the classic example is if you have a large mirror, let's say you're at the gymnasium and you're working out and doing curls with your dumbbells, and the person next to you is doing incline presses, and you can see all these various people in the one mirror. It is one mirror that appears as these various reflections. So also the multiplicity of the universe. It certainly is seen. Beautiful, unique. But it's just consciousness appearing as name and form. And again, I've kind of been riffing on an image that Ernest Holmes uses, which is consciousness is like water The names and forms are like ice. The various forms of ice occur in it. They may have different shape, but they're not different from the water. They're not apart from the water. And when they melt, what happens to the water? Nothing. All right, going on.
कौसलेषु द्विज कश्चित् गुणी गाधि इति श्रुतः आकण्ठम् अम्बुनिर्मग्नं तपस्वृके ततो हरिः आगत्योचे द्विजोत्तिष्ठ गृहाणाभिमतं वरम्. There was a certain Brahmana in the Kausala country who was virtuous and known as Gadhi. He did religious austerity immersed in water up to the neck. Then Hari, or God Vishnu, coming near him said, Brahmana, get up, receive the desired boon.
So again, this is a literary device, but it talks about what most of us do with our prayer. We do an austerity, a tapas of some sort. This guy was in water up to his neck for a long time. It's to get what we want. So Hari here says, take a boon. Again, it's a literary device to move the story forward. Let's see what happens.
Gadhiruvacha Tvaya srishtam imam mayam bhagavan paramatmikim drashtumichhami sansara nani ascharya karinim. Gadhi said, Lord, I desire to see this illusory power of the Supreme Spirit, created by you, which is called worldly existence and which causes wonder.
So he asks to see behind the picture show. So you go to a puppet show and you see the puppets playing, and your question is, what are the puppeteers? Who are the puppeteers? So he wants to know, how has the universe come about? And by what means does it happen? So let's see how the Lord answers the question. Going on.
Imam drakshyasi mayam tvam ityuktva antadardhe harihi. You will see this illusory power. Thus, having said, Hari, or the god Vishnu, disappeared.
So he promises him an answer, and then he goes poof and disappears. Going on.
Snanatham ekada gadhihi mamajjanta jalam tada apashyat mritamatmanam swagrihe bandhubhi vritam. Once, Gadhi dipped under water for the purpose of bathing. Then he saw himself dead in his house, surrounded by kinsmen.
So, again, when you dip yourself under the water for a bath, it doesn't take very long, especially if the water is cold. So he's there in the river, goes down there to take his bath. He dips under the water, and the next thing, he's having this vision. He sees himself in his house, dead, people around. Let's see what happens.
Tato nitva shamshante chakrustam bhasmasat shavam atha pashya dasau bhuyo hunagrama nivasinam vapachanam grihe jatam atmanam kantayat yutam. Thereafter, they, the kinsmen, having carried that corpse to the cremation ground, reduced it to ashes. Then he saw himself again as born in the house of outcasts, dwelling in the village of the Hunas or barbarians, and endowed with a wife.
So he sees his own cremation, then he sees himself, as it were, incarnate into another body with another family, but as a tribal person, as an outcast. See what happens. Going on.
Tato jarashtatam yatam mrityuna hrita bandhavam. Then he saw himself as having become old, with his relations taken away by death.
So as happens to us all in this lifetime as an outcast, he becomes old, and everyone he loves has died. Going on.
Tata shoka pat paritatma nijam desham vihayasa nagaram prapya kiranam rajamarge sthita tada. Thereafter, with his mind encompassed by grief, having left his country and reached the city of the Kiras, or the country of Kashmir, he stood on the royal highway. Then,
So he leaves his tribal home as an outcast, heads to Kashmir, and he's then standing on the side of the road where it's a royal highway, meaning the courtly processions go by. Let's see what happens.
Mrite Rajani Rajartham Viharantam Itastatah Hastinam Sa Dadarshartha Karinadayatam Gajaha Skande Nyaveshayat Modat Nedu Dandu Bhayastada Evam Gavalana Nasao Kirarajo Babhuvaha. Then he saw an elephant going about here and there for the sake of finding a king, when the king of that country was dead. Thereafter, that elephant, having taken hold of him with his trunk, seated him on its body with delight. Then,
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Then kettle drums sounded. Thus he verily became the king of the Kiras by name Gavala.
So in this particular country, when the king dies, it's not his children that become king, but they send out this elephant who then will choose who the next king will be. So the elephant comes up, likes him, grabs him by the trunk, puts him on top. So now he becomes a king. So he goes from a Brahmin to an outcast. Now he becomes a king. Let's see what happens.
Ashtau Varnani Rajam Sa Chakara Mantri Pujitaha. He ruled the country for 8 years, respected by the ministers.
So even though he was a Brahmin and then an outcast, he had some gifts. He rules the country wisely and well and is respected by the leaders. Going on.
Yadrichha yaikadam tam tu nirgatam tyakta bhushanam alakshya vyapacha kaschet prochecha chira bandhava darshanena tavadhyaham param nirvritti magataha. Once a certain outcast, having beheld him by chance, come out with his ornaments abandoned, addressed him, "Old relative, I have attained the greatest satisfaction by your sight today."
So the king is walking around in the garden and he doesn't have a lot of his regalia with him. And an outcast sees him and says, "Ah, you're my cousin. I remember you. So happy to see you." Let's see what happens.
Shrutvedam mantrina sarve vatayana gatastriyah shvapacho yam mahipala iti nishchitya dukkhitaha. Having heard this, all the ministers and the women who were at the windows were distressed, having concluded, "This king is an outcast."
So they did not know that the elephant had chosen an outcast for a king. Now, we have to set aside the obvious classist and racist imagery to get to the import of the story. I'm not even going to try to rationalize it, because they're going to now say that they've been defiled because they've been ruled by an outcast. Thank God things are different. I was looking on Facebook, and in India, Pope Francis has made a man born an outcast, an untouchable, a cardinal of the Roman Catholic Church, a prince of the church, the highest station. So things are changing slowly. But this text is at least 1,000 years old, maybe 1,500. It is in a historical context. So take it with a grain of salt and see if we can catch the underlying point that Vashishta is driving at. So everybody in the palace finds out that he's an untouchable. Let's see what happens.
Tata prabhrittinas prakshu tishtantam tam shavam yatha atha sarve vayam dirgha kalam shvapacha dushitaha prayashchataihi na shabda prayashchataihi na shabdhamaha pravishamo hatoshanam iti nirniya sarvegni vivishu saha bandhubihi. Thenceforward, they did not touch him, the living king, as if he were a corpse. Then all of them, having determined, "We have been defiled for a long time by the outcast. We shall not become pure by expiatory acts. Let us enter into the fire." Entered into the fire along with their relatives.
So all the people at court who've been socializing with this fellow have decided they've been ritually defiled because they've been consorting with an untouchable. No matter how many pujas they do, how many ritual baths they do, they're defiled. Their only solution is to go jump on a funeral pyre. A little extreme, but that's what they decide to do. Let's see what happens.
Raja matva madartham hi deshe nartho yamagataha iti vahnau anudvegam ajuhava nijam vapuhu. The king, having thought, It is indeed on account of me that this calamity has occurred in this country. Sacrificed his body in the fire without trembling or fear.
So he, feeling guilt for having caused this calamity, he too jumps on the funeral pyre. You know, I always wonder with the story, why didn't they get mad at the elephant for making a bad choice? But anyway, they did. So now he jumps on the fire. Let's see what happens once he gets immolated. Going on.
Atrantare na laksha bandho gadhi mohat abundhayat koham kimiva pashyami kimakarsha aham kila evam vichara yanshritram udasthat udakantarat. In the meanwhile, Gadhi, disturbed by the fire, woke up from his delusion. Who am I? What possibly do I see? What indeed did I do? Thus thinking variously, he got up from under the water.
So all of this took place, this long life as an outcast, living as a tribal husband, then 8 years as a king, was all a mental delusion while his head was under the water. He gets up out of the water, maybe 20, 30 seconds he was under the water. This whole thing happened. Who am I? There's that very old Zen proverb about a king who woke up and had dreamt he was a butterfly. And he asks, am I a king who dreamt I was a butterfly? Or am I a butterfly who's now dreaming I'm a king? And the answer gets us out of body consciousness altogether. Going on.
Section 2. Mithya drishtasya satyata. The reality of what was seen falsely. Cheto brahmatya nantasu bhranti drishtishu dehinam iti matva sthitate tasmin ajagam priyo tirthiti kramat shayana masadhya gadhi prapachatam dvijam. The mind of the embodied ones or living beings wanders about in endless delusive perceptions or notions. Thus, having reflected, when he stood there, a welcome or dear guest arrived. Gradually, seating him on a couch, Gadhi asked that Brahmana as follows.
So he has seen the mind is capable of enormous delusions. I think our modern day metaphor for all this is the movie Inception. I haven't seen The Matrix, but I hear it's very similar. But in Inception, it's just dream after dream after dream after dream. Problem with the movie is it posits that there's a real waking state someplace. And yoga says, if you can see it, if you can experience it, if it has name and form, if it has people, places, things, and conditions, without exception, it is like a dream. Koham, who am I? Chidananda Rupaham, Shivoham, Shivoham. I am of the form of bliss consciousness. I am Shiva. am auspiciousness. I am outside of any world of name and form. Asangoham, 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 punaha, satchidananda upoham, aham mevaham mamyaya. Unattached, unattached, unattached am I again. I am of the nature of existence, consciousness, and bliss. I am that I am. Immutable. So now God is talking to his neighbor, another Brahmin. Let's see what they say.
Kim Brahman Sankrishangastvam Kimiti Shramavas Vanasi. Brahmana, why are you weak-bodied? Why indeed are you weary?
So his friend says, why are you trembling and so upset about this? You should know better. Going on.
Atithi uvacha Kireshu Nyavasam Masam Tatraisha hi kathashruta. The guest said, I lived in the land of the Kiras for a month, and there this story was heard.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood who was talking. So Hadi says to the guest, why are you trembling? What's your story? Now this verse, the guest is saying what happened. So please go ahead. He's going to tell the story about the king who was the outcast. Going on.
Iha bhuta shwapacho raja varsharnyashtau dvijotama sa evante parignyata pravishto jwalanam javad tatha dvijashata niha pravishtani hutashanam. Excellent Brahmana, here an outcast was the king for 8 years. He was just found out or recognized at the end and entered into fire in haste. So also 200 Brahmanas entered into the fire.
So he's just come from this country. 200 people committed suicide, as well as the king who was the outcast. 8 years he was on the throne. Remember, Gadi just got back from the river, where he had his head under the water for maybe a minute. So what is the story doing? It is purposely messing with our belief in the linear unfoldment of time and space. Who knows what the next Maya, Ishvara, will spin? But when we're in these various stories of the mind, they always seem logical. For example, Gadi, as the outcast, never said, how did I get from the river to this tribe? It's only after he woke up, as it were, that he began to question. So did it happen or not? Gadi thinks it's all just a fancy and imagination. His friend says, oh no, it really happened. Let's see. Going on.
iti shrutva tato gatva prayashittam vidhaya cha kramat chandrayana syante paranartham ihagatah shrantoham upavasena nanyadasti hi karanam. Thus, having heard and then departed, and having performed expiation of the sin in the proper manner, I have come here for the conclusion of the fast at the end of the Chandrayana vow. I am weary with fasting. Surely there is no other reason for my weakness. Note: Chandrayana is an expiatory penance involving fasting regulated by the moon's waxing and waning.
So this particular Brahmana, because of the exposure to this terrible situation, didn't jump on the fire. Instead, he's doing very austere penance. Going on.
Iti tenoditam shrutva vismayavishtamanasah gadhishcha chintayamasa madvrittanto yamidrishaha. Thus, having heard what was told by him, Gadhi, with his mind overcome with wonder, thought, "This, my history, is such."
So he realizes his fellow has told the story of what he just experienced with his head under the water. Going on.
Atha nirgatya sa drishtum hunamandala magatah tatra drishtva yatha purva nijam vyapachamandaram kiramandalamasadhya swanubhutani drishtavan. Then, having gone out, he came to see the region of the Hunas. There, having seen his own house of the outcast as before, and having reached the territory of the Kira, he saw the things experienced by him.
Yes. So he goes to those actual places. Now, how could this happen? How could he have lived years and years and years as an outcast in this house? Then 8 years as a king, when all of it took place when his head was under the water a minute. Twilight Zone. Going on.
Vismayokti Vismayot Kampita Shirah Dhatuштeshtam Paramishan Bhuyo Gadhi Tapaschakre Tivram Shelasya Kandare Agatya cha Tapaprita Uche Chakra Gadhadaraha. With the head trembling with astonishment and reflecting on the deed of God Vishnu, Gadhi again performed penance intensely in the cave of a mountain. The bearer of the discus and the mace, or God Vishnu, satisfied with the penance of Gadhi and having come near him, spoke as follows.
So again, the literary device, he needs to get an understanding, so he does penance and Vishnu shows up again. Going on.
Mama maya tvaya drishtva kimanyat abhivanchasi gadhiruvacha tasya marma na janami brahma satyo bhavat katham. My illusion has been seen by you. What else do you wish for? Gadhi said, I do not comprehend its secret. How did a delusion become real?
So here is the crux of the question. He had a direct experience, but he has no understanding of it. Now remember, this text is answering three questions. Who am I? What is this world? And how has it come about? So that's our frame. So Gotti doesn't quite understand it. Let's see what the Lord says. Going on.
Section 3. Bhagavan Updeshaha, the teaching of the Lord.
Yes.
Shri Bhagavana Uvacha. The Blessed Lord said, Chittastham hi pathit vadi na bahistham kadachana swapna brahma padartheshu sarvaire vanubhuyate. The earth and the like, or the physical elements, are only in the mind and never at any time exist separately. They are experienced just by everybody in the delusive objects of a dream.
So, the thunderous message of Vedanta, of yoga, of Tantra. There is no material world apart from consciousness. The world of name and form is simply vibration held together by thought. It is not outside of consciousness. We do not have an individual mind. We have what appears to be individual use of one mind, which is everywhere present. Chaitanya, the play of consciousness itself. There are no exceptions to this. In Mandukya Upanishad, in the second chapter, the fourth Karika, Gaudapada says, the phenomenal world is quite unreal. The proof of its unreality is you can see it. It's observed, like the dream. Only the seer is real. Anything seen is mithya, illusory, without exception. Comes about in the same manner as the dream, meaning, you hear me say this over and over again, you are the God of your dream. Same way you create the dream world, so also the infinite Lord creates all of this. Macrocosm, microcosm. And my perception and experience of the phenomenal world is to a large degree the result of my own imaginations, my largely unconscious individual use of this one mind. We have a limited freedom. And what we find, the more our sankalpa aligns with the law of harmony, the law of love, the more life, joy, enthusiasm, self-expression we have in this world. The more we start to pull the plug on our connection with the infinite and deny that unity in all sorts of ways, then bit by bit, these forms, first of all, the things in our life and eventually our body itself, starts to go, it's like the ice melting, it goes back to unformed substance. A lot of profound implication in this teaching. This is why the Master Jesus said, love one another as I have loved you. All right, going on. Let's see what Lord Vishnu says.
Yatranta jagatjalam sansthitam tena chetasa darshitam shwapachatvam chet tadatra vismaya kutaha. If by that mind, where the endless illusion of the world is situated, the state of an outcast has been displayed, then whence is the astonishment in this matter?
So Lord Vishnu says, why should you be surprised? There was just the imagination of the outcast. You could just have easily been a dog or a lizard or a king or a ballet dancer. Just mind taking form as all these things. And again, for most of us, largely unconscious. Most of us do not realize the enormous creativity of the human mind. Going on.
Yatha shwapachata drishta pratibhasa vashatvaya tathai atithi mayatam drishtavanasi sambhrame. As the state of being an outcast was perceived by you through the influence of illusion, so also you have seen the guest who had arrived in that delusion.
So, just as the state of the outcast was an illusion, so also was the fellow that you thought was real in your waking state. That was an illusion too. So again, if we go to Mandukya, in the first chapter, we say Om has got 4 quarters, Uman, silence, waking, dream, deep sleep state, and the Turiya, the consciousness in which they all occur. In the second chapter, Gaudapada says, well, actually, you really only have 2 mind states, sleep and dream. You're either in the state of sleep where your perception is blank, or you're seeing stuff. That's a dream. Whether you think you're awake, or it's at nighttime, etc., or you take Molly, or you have some other experience. If it has name and form, it is nothing but the play of mind. Don't take it seriously. Going on.
Tatha hunasthalam prapya drishtosi praktanam griham tatha kireshu rajatvam drishtvan pratibimbitam. Thus, you have seen the former residents, having reached the place of the Hunas. So have you seen the kingship of the Kiras reflected in the mind that caused the delusion.
So it's the mind that's caused these pictures to appear, whether it be as an outcast in the land of the Hunas, or as a king in the land of the Kiras, or as Gadi in your original perception of a life. Going on.
Kadachit pratibhaikaiva bahun namapi jayate tenaiva sanniveshena shwapacho pyabhavatpura. At some time or other, the one light of consciousness alone is born as that of the many. Only by its deep entrance or proximity, the outcast also came into existence formally.
So, this is the great mystery of Maya. At some time or another, consciousness forks into subject-object, and a form appears that's illumined by consciousness. The form is nothing other than consciousness, appearing as that name and form. It arose. Now, what does that mean for you and me? So last week, COVID arose. A year ago, stock market soaring. Today, stock market dumping. But the ground of being is never change. It's all safe. Just like when you have a nightmare, you wake up and your heart is pounding. Because in the dream you thought it was real. So also, if we get deluded by the term that he used a couple verses back, Jagat Jala, the web of the world. Love that one. Because if you think of it, the spider's got a web, and then when the bugs come, the web is sticky, and it gets caught in the web. So also, our minds get caught in the web of thought. And it gets sticky. And I think it's all happening to me. I lose the fact that, in fact, I'm always Sakshi, witness. Going on.
Nakira nripati bhutva pravivesha nalam tataha tava bhuta kevalam chitte swasambandhitaya hitat. Having become the king of the Kiras, he then entered into the fire. That indeed happened solely in your mind due to self-relatedness.
Yes. meaning identification. So all of our various life experiences are only the projections of the mind. Where does it come from? Most of the time, unconscious, the force of the past maturing as it interacts with society itself. Nobody deliberately says, I choose to have a miserable day. But those underlying unconscious impressions form that particular dream. Good news is it always passes, and it never touches me. Going on.
Jnanasya aparipunatvat na shaknoshi manobhramam vinivarayitum tenaiv vakramyase shanat. Due to the lack of fullness of knowledge, you are not able to ward off the mental delusion. On account of that, you are overcome in a moment by that very delusion.
So, if we have yoga balam, the power of yoga, and I'm clear because of my deep experience that I've had in my meditation, in my scripture study, in satsang, aham brahmasmi, I'm that partless Brahman. Then when these illusory appearances arise, I'm able to say, I'm not going to believe it. I'm not going to buy into it. No personal sense of self is real. I'm going to give up narratives from the past. I'm going to give up the stories by which I've habitually identified and concretized self. Remember our former story of Dhamma and others, the super demons? And the second generation of them, the 2.0, they have the tools to be able to keep egoism from forming. So Gandhi did not have that. So he got caught in the delusions of his mind, in the Jagat Jal, the web. Going on.
Tapa kuru tvamuthaya tato jnanam vapyasi ityukta tyakta sankalpa gadhi tatra karotapah atma chintaya rupam cha manobhrama nivrittaye dasha varshani te nasau atmajnanam avaptavan जीवन मुक्त पदम प्राप्य वीतशोको babhuvacha. Having risen, you perform penance for spiritual enlightenment. Then you will gain knowledge. Thus told, Gadhi, with his wishes or imaginations given up, did penance there for 10 years in the form of reflection on the self, for the cessation of mental delusion. By that penance, he obtained knowledge of the self and attained to the state of liberation while living. He became free from sorrow.
So, Lord Vishnu says the way you get rid of this stuff, apyasa vairagya cha, practice, and tense renunciation. Let's go back to Shankara's definition of vairagya. That desire, meaning we don't achieve it in a trice. That desire to give up all attachments to enjoyments. Here we mean experiences gained through the senses. And let go, let go, let go. And disidentify with all forms of self, from the body up to and including the form of Brahma, the creator. I'm not a person, never was a person, just the witness. This is not only done in the white heat of our meditation, but all through the day. Yasa Vayana. So Gandhi spends 10 years doing this, giving up all his false ideas of self, till he's rooted in the direct experience. Shivoham, Shivoham. I am Shiva, I am auspicious. Going on. How much longer is this chapter? Are we almost to the end of it?
Yeah, about 8 more verses.
I think we'll make it. Okay.
Evam eshati vitata durgyatna raghunandanan paramatma shaya maya mahamoha kari sada chitta kramana matratu paramat aushadhat hrite prayatnenapi sansara maharogo na shamyati. Raghunandana or Rama. Thus, in this incomprehensible illusion, depending on the Supreme Self, spread out exceedingly, causing great delusion always. The great disease of worldly existence is indeed not extinguished even by continued effort without the most excellent medicine of the mere overcoming of the mind.
So, what is it in the end that I need to renounce? I need to quit believing the mind. I cannot think a real thought. I disempower the mind by seeing it for what it is. Always mere imagination. We do not overcome the mind by willfully gripping it into quietude. In the beginning, there's some of that may be about, but in the end, the way to overcome the mind is to see it for what it is. It's a ghost. It's not real. Don't believe it. Any thoughts on this? Going on.
Vartmanam kramayatam bhajat bahya didha shanam abhajat bhavi bhutam cha yati chittam achittatam. Accepting the present that has arrived in regular course for the moment with the externalized intellect and not accepting or entertaining the future and the past, the mind is reduced to the state free from thoughts.
Yes. So now he tells us how to do it. Stay here. Stay now. Stay out of the past. Stay out of the future. Stay totally present to the now. Going on.
Chetanam chittariktam hi pratyak chetanamujyate nirmanas kasvabhavatu na tatra kalanamalah. The conscious mind, emptied or devoid of thoughts, is indeed called the inner intelligent principle or the individual soul. Because of its inherent nature being free from the thinking mind, there is no taint of thought or seizing of objects there.
So, what is the mind? The awareness of vrittis, the awareness of thought flow. Disengage from the thought flow, and what's left is your essential nature. You have a thought, you have a feeling. You do not have awareness. You are awareness. Just withdraw our attention from the knowable and see that in the eternal subject, there's no thought. There's no past, present, or future. No taint, no form. No concern, no nothing. Chidananda Rupa, of the form of bliss consciousness. Don't believe me. Go there and see for yourself. Next verse.
Malam samvedhyam mutsrijya mano nirmalayan param asha pashan alam chitva sanvin matra paro bhava tadaiva kshiyate moha sansara brahma karanam. Having cast away the dirt of the known or what is to be known, making the mind clear or bright completely, and having thoroughly broken asunder the fetters of hope or desire, be absorbed in pure consciousness only. Then alone is delusion or ignorance, which is the cause of roaming about in worldly existence, destroyed.
So here he is pointing towards that supreme state when the mind has thundered to a stop. Then stay absorbed in that, even when the mind returns. See if you can keep it absorbed in the self. Next one.
Anatmanya atma bhavena mamedam iti bhavatah ahankara vikarena cheto gacchati pitanam. By the idea or sense of the self in the non-self, and because of the feeling, this is mine, And by the malady or feeling of egotism, the mind becomes swollen with thoughts.
Yes. So what makes the swollen thoughts happen? I think the world's real. I think my body's real. This is mine. This is not mine. I need more, better, different. I mean mine, I mean mine, I mean mine. How am I doing? Am I okay? What do they think of me? Then I regret the past, worry about the future, and miss the bliss of the now. Next one.
Heya deya vibhagena samaschasena sansritao snehena dhanalobhena cheto gacchati pinatam. By the division of what is fit to be abandoned and what is fit to be received, by trust in worldly life, by attachment, and by greed for wealth, the mind becomes swollen with thoughts.
Yes. So these are the things that cause us to become a sufferer. Concern with what I need to acquire, what I need to get rid of. And did I hear him use the word sneha?
Yeah.
So that's kind of this kind of oily kind of attachment. So, how would you translate it?
Yeah, it's like the sticky kind of love is what.
Yes, yes. It's like the person says, oh, I know I was in love because it hurt so much. That's crazy. Sticky love. These are the things that cause us grief. This is the web of worldly existence. Let it go. Next one. How many more have we got? We've only got a minute or two.
One more left.
Okay, perfect.
Uddala kavadalunam vishirnam bhuta panchakam kritva kritva dhiya dhira dhirayanta vicharaya. Brave one, having cut off and shattered the 5 elements of earth, water, fire, air, and ether, repeatedly like Uddalaka, investigate with a steady or resolute intellect. Note, this refers to the weaning away of the mind from the external universe constituted of the physical elements and reflecting on the true nature of the self with a view to getting established in one's own real nature, pure being consciousness.
Yep. I have nothing to add. This is the work that we are to do. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Om Tat Sat. Thank you all. So Ashtavakra Gita on Wednesday morning will be Zoom. Tripura Rahasya on Thursday will be Zoom. But Sunday night Gita will be back to hybrid. So those of you who are local are more than welcome to come and hang out. And we'll be back to our normal course format after that. Any thoughts, questions? All right. Good.